Well, it is the first week of August, and my, oh my, you know what that means. It is college football season. It is knocking on the door. We've survived the Media Day circus. If you're a college football fan, you know that. And now we're actually ready to talk about some leagues and give you some previews. Brett Thakara, Dan Tomaso with you. And Dan, you know, we had some guests on recently in Tim Brando and Mr. Phil Steele that helped to preview the college football season for us. And now we're going to go league by league and look at some of the teams we love to talk about. It is that time of year. Merry Christmas, my friend.
Merry Christmas indeed. And, you know, it's that momentum. It's kind of the anxiety of the season building. Every game matters. Every week matters. Some of the teams we talk about today maybe could factor into the bigger picture, but just in general, if you are a college football fan, games will get started in earnest soon. And some of these teams we'll talk about today, too, are the ones you see during the weeknights, the kind of filler games, if you will, to get to the weekend.
But I'll tell you, they're fun, too. We're going to do our group of five preview today. We're going to talk about the American Conference, the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, the Mountain West, the Sun Belt, and, oh, yeah, Maction. Let's not forget about them.
Can't forget Maction.
And I've got Mr. Steele's magazine right here as he gave us some nuggets to think about last week. So when you were doing some research here in the group of five teams, and I realized, too, these aren't necessarily the sexy names, but, you know, Brando mentioned in his interview with us, look at what Tulane did last year, right? They were able to knock off Kansas State early, and then they were able to knock off USC in the bowl game. I love watching the Coastal Carolinas of the world. To me, it's these teams that we're going to talk about today that make the sport fun.
It does make the sport fun, and it gives everyone, it's kind of like spring training for baseball. Everyone has the opportunity at the start of the season. So whether it's the Tulanes of the world, not to give too much away, what about SMU? What about UTSA? What about teams like Troy or Boise State? Just some names to kind of keep in mind that even when you think your main team has a cupcake and one of these group of five rolls into town, better watch yourself from time to time.
Well, everybody knows that one of the teams you didn't mention there was App State, and they were able to hang with Penn State a few years back, took us to overtime, I believe. Of course, what put them on the map was the big Michigan win in 2005, but then they beat Texas A&M last year. That's what really got people to talk about Jimbo needing to revamp things. Yep. They went into the SEC and beat one of the Blue Bloods in Texas A&M and took care of them. They were the more physical team. I mean, and they had a heck of a game against North Carolina. Remember that one last year? It was a shootout.
Yes, it was a shootout, and a lot of these games tend to be shootouts. I think one thing here in my notes is, you know, defense. Many of these group of five teams may not have the best defenses in the world, but they can score, and that's what makes them dangerous on any given Saturday.
Yeah, they kind of outsmart the traditional defenses, and they put on a show, which is why we like watching them during the week or sometimes on a Saturday. But let's get into it. We're going to start with the American here. And, Dan, I'm going to pull up the graphic here. We've got the futures on this, the American Athletic Conference futures. You put this list together. Tulane comes in at number one. That's the Vegas favorite to win the conference. And, of course, they did last year, and they represented the group of five in the New Year's Six Bowls. They're at plus 230, SMU plus 280. UTSA right there with SMU at plus 280. And then it falls off a cliff a little bit with some of the odds. You've got Memphis at plus 650 and FAU at plus 850. Maybe there's some good value there, but when you look at that list, who do you like to win the American this year?
Well, one thing to keep note of, too, is when you're looking at these graphics, if you're watching us on YouTube, keep in mind all the changes in the conferences. So,
right, I had a hard time keeping track.
Yes, it's very confusing because obviously the big defections were the Cincinnatis, the Houstons of the world to the Big 12, but then there were holes in the AAC. And so you got to keep in mind the Roadrunners, they won the last two Conference USA championships. So UTSA joining the AAC this year. Tulane, obviously, on the Cinderella season last year, they have their quarterback, Michael Pratt, returning, 6 returning offensive players, 5 defensive players. So they have some good turnover, or at least good returners coming in from last year's team with only minimal turnover. I think they could challenge some top 25 teams this year. But don't sleep on SMU, Coach Rhett Lashley. Of course, TCU's fame came from a former SMU coach. So SMU is always loaded with talent and offense. Certainly something to keep in mind. They have a gauntlet, though, of a schedule. That's the other problem with some of these teams, too, that unfortunately, being group of five, they get to play some of the bigger boys, if you will. And so the schedules remain tough. But Tulane is certainly a contender. We've heard their name many times already.
They are. Is that who you're going with? Because I got to tell you, you mentioned UTSA, and I really like Jeff Traylor. I think he's got some talent on that team, and they do have to play at Tulane, which scares me a little bit this year if you look at the schedule.
Yep.
But they do avoid SMU and Memphis during the regular season, so that's a plus. I'm actually going to go with them, and if you look at the odds, I mean Tulane's plus 230. And UTSA is plus 280, so I think you can get some good value there. But I like UTSA to win the American this year. I think they have the talent to do it. They've certainly not shied away from that type of stuff. And I mean, again, what's not to love about Jeff Traylor and the mascot of the Roadrunners? Are you going to go with me here, or do you like Tulane?
I like Tulane, and I go back to the tough schedule I just mentioned. UTSA has road games against Houston, Tennessee, and Tulane. So they could get beat up a little bit. And the problem with some of these teams is the depth. So while their starters may be flashy and can keep up, I'm going to go with Tulane. I think they have a really good run in them again this year. When they host UTSA, that could be for the AAC title in a way.
They do have 14 returning starters. They're going to be ranked in the preseason. I just don't know that they can go all the way. They do have to play Ole Miss. They have to play UAB. They go to Memphis, at East Carolina, and then they wrap it up with UTSA at home. That game might be for a spot in the championship, perhaps, or depending on how this breaks down.
Well, and their
getting the championship.
First three games, South Alabama, which could be a little bit of a improved team, also in the group of five.
Yeah, don't
Miss.
sleep on South Alabama. Yeah, so and usually when a team performs the way they did last year, I kind of am hesitant to pick them again, especially in the group of five. Somebody else is going to emerge. So we differ a little bit there, but again, Tulane has plus 230 odds. UTSA is plus 280. It's not that big of a jump to say that either one could do it. And, of course, SMU is right there, too. But I want to pull up now some of the season win totals because this is always fun to look at it. This will help us, Dan, also keep straight who's in what conference this year. So Tulane is tops here at 9.5. Memphis is at 8.5, along with SMU. You know, it's funny. UTSA only has 7.5 win total by Vegas. They are behind Memphis and SMU. What do you make of that?
You know, I think it's proven. You know, you're coming into a new conference. Perhaps the schedule, as we mentioned, Houston, Tennessee, Tulane, they got to rack up wins. So getting to that total could be a little bit on the difficult side.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, I think they can probably do it. Hint.
Well, they score.
They score, and they're not afraid of anybody. Navy is in the AAC this year, 5.5, and we go down from there. How about Temple? They're in the American Athletic Conference, and
Temple.
and then Charlotte bringing up the bottom with 3.5 wins. But there's your season win totals. This is tough. And if you remember, I wanted to ask you this, and I didn't tell you this ahead of time, so I'll put you a bit on the spot here. But
sure,
we're doing this just for fun. Not that I may not place a sawbuck or two on a season win total. But remember what Brad Powers said. You're not going to get good value there unless you're a real professional, and it's probably not smart to go all in on a season win total. Start looking ahead to some of the week one matchups, which of course we're going to do in just a few weeks. But it's August, and so I just wondered your thoughts on what Powers had to say about kind of giving some wagers on these season win totals because it's tough. I mean, you just don't know. I think this goes to your point. We just don't know what these teams are going to be. We may think we do, but until you play a couple of games, I think it's tough.
I am eager to see how we do in weeks 1 and week 2, let alone season win totals, because NIL, transfer portal, how do you keep track of who's where and what's going on? I mean, just to kind of crash course these group of 5 teams, it was difficult to see where the talent is, where some of the top talent is in terms of quarterback. You know, quarterback kind of drives the ship, but also what are the defensives like? What are these coordinators like? There's so many coaching changes. App State, for instance, has been through a plethora of coaching changes the last few years. So I think that's where the danger is in these totals, that if you go off of last year, that's some intel, but it's not enough.
It's not, and again, you can read the Bible on this, whether it's Phil Steele's or whether it's another analyst you love, and we follow this pretty closely, maybe not as close as some, but I would say as most, and it makes your head spin. I mean, it really does.
Yes.
So let's talk about, though, what some of our season win totals are. I'll start, and then
go ahead and
we'll get
read
to
them
you.
off, because I actually cannot see the graphic. I didn't think about that being on my back porch, but you're going to have to read them off for me.
No, I plan to. I got you. I got your back.
Appreciate
it. Don't worry, folks, too. I know some of you listening to this may not know that we are apart, but when season 2 kicks off in August, we will be together again right here.
Absolutely.
And that is going to be fun in just a couple of weeks. So I actually like Tulane to go under their 9.5, and this is some of the things that we have discussed before, Dan, that I think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. And when you look at that schedule and you start to break it down a little bit, I don't know if they can get to 10 wins, and that's where, again, it makes me a little nervous, because I think they're good. And they're going to be good, and they may even win the conference, as you said. But can they get to 10 wins? I'm a little dubious on that, especially because some of their road games may be a little more challenging than we think. Even again, starting off the season against South Alabama, then Ole Miss, which they actually do get at home, but they have to go to Memphis on a Friday night and to East Carolina. That makes me a little nervous. Then they end the season against UTSA, who I like. That's my second pick here, to go over the 7.5. I just don't see it. By the way, Dan, you have the same picks. You went under for Tulane and UTSA over. We actually picked the same ones. Give your reasoning for both.
Well, so I like UTSA's offense. I like the momentum they have coming in from last year. I think it's a very manageable total, a win total. So where I think Tulane has a very high win total to look at, and think about the number of teams that actually get 9 or 10 wins in college football. It's a pretty select group. So when you look at that and you look at regression to the mean, so to speak, as you said, there's going to be a game or two that you don't expect, I think, Tulane to lose. I think UTSA, though, coming in kind of the new kid on the block, their schedule's tough, but I think they could manage some good in-conference wins. The rest of the conference isn't that great. And this is a year of transition for the AAC.
I would agree. Now, let's look at their schedule quickly, and then we'll move on to our next conference. But it is a little tougher than I thought. But, again, they have to get to 8. So, at Houston, that's going to be challenging. I think we need them to win that game, though, if we want to get them to 8. Let's see. Texas State is next. I think they can beat Army. Then they play at Tennessee, which is an interesting game. That's going to be a loss. If you give them at least 2, they're at 2 at Temple. They can probably win that. UAB, there's 4 at FAU, 5 East Carolina, 6 at North Texas should be a win, 7. Rice is 8. So UCF, that should be 9. I mean, at Tulane, at Houston, even if you don't give them that, at Tennessee, there's 3 losses. And even if you give them a 4th, Dan, of teams that we think they are better than, you still get your 8 wins. That's why I would tend to think that we could get the over here with the 7.5.
Well, we got to let it play out, don't we? But this is the fun part about this, that you really have to go game by game, week by week. And I think what's interesting about this conference is the quarterback play and how that could. So this could be an offensive league here this year, just based on some of the returning talent and what these teams bring to the table.
Well, but the problem is, as you said, some of them are just plain bad.
Yes,
and
some of them are just plain bad.
That's going to be the issue. So let's move on to Conference USA now. Here are the top 5 odds. WKU at plus 100. They're a big favorite to win the conference this year. And again, with the shift, some new teams coming in. How about Liberty in Conference USA? They're plus 280 to win the conference.
The old independent.
Yes, and then after that, you've got odds that fall precipitously. You've got Middle Tennessee State at 550, 900 for LA Tech, and 1100 for UTEP. And again, I love UTEP, but I'm not sure those odds are great. I do like Western Kentucky, but this is something that they haven't done. They tend to start hot and then fade. Give me your thoughts on who you like to win the conference based on the top five here.
They put up points, Western Kentucky. So they're bringing back Austin Reed. They got Malachi Corley, a wide receiver. I think defense is going to tell the tale there, that's for sure. They definitely seem like a front runner here in the conference, but don't sleep on Liberty. We know they had a huge coaching change, one of your best friends in college football. But they bring back Caden Salter. They were an independent. I want to see how they do in conference, but I think this is kind of a soft landing, if you will, for Liberty. I don't know how you feel about it. And then you mentioned Middle Tennessee State. They were 8-5 last year, very respectable throughout the year. They had a couple of very good wins. Chase Cunningham's back, but in particular, their defense is probably one of the best in the conference with returning players. So those are some of the notes I had on some of the teams to keep an eye on there.
Okay, let's bring up now too. So before we move on, you got to give me your pick though for the conference winner before
Yes.
we get to season win totals. Who do you like? And I'll give you mine. I think I'm going to go outside the box just a hair. Go ahead.
I'm going to go Liberty.
Really? You're good. So
Yes.
it's the second favorite in odds, and that is. Let me go back here. Liberty has a plus 280. I mean, again, that's fair. You're not going to lose a lot. You have a lot to gain here. I think you and I agree. I think WKU, even though they are the favorite here, may have a tough road.
Do you have their schedule pulled up?
WKU?
Yep, I can do it right now.
I don't have their schedule pulled up, but we can certainly read it off. So they open against UCF, then Houston Christian. Here's the deal. They go at Ohio State, at Troy in back-to-back weeks. I don't love that.
Yes, I saw the Ohio State game. I did not like that. Troy is one of my teams to keep an eye on, too, out of the group of five. Middle Tennessee State should be a challenge coming off of that. And then Louisiana Tech, JSU.
Right.
Liberty.
They host at home, but then they have to go to UTEP.
Right.
And that's the issue.
It's tough.
It's tough. And I'm going to go UTEP here. I think that they could be.
Wow.
Yeah. And remember, as we look at that, now that's plus 1,100. Now, if I, put down $5 or $10 on that, maybe more, you could get a good return. Here's the deal. They do play their three toughest foes at the end of their schedule. So let me go to their schedule for a second. See, they end with Western Kentucky, but they get them at home. That's November 4th. And they go to Middle Tennessee, and then they bring things back home and host Liberty at the end.
Yeah, that's a gauntlet. That reminds me of the Novembers to remember in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's tough. So let's talk about the win totals here. So I'm gonna take a flyer on UTEP, and you're gonna go with Liberty. Liberty does have the highest season win total at 8.5, and then Western Kentucky's number 2.
I did make note of that.
It's funny that Western Kentucky's favored to win the conference, but they aren't favored to get as many wins as Liberty. And then again, it drops off after that. Middle Tennessee 6.5, UTEP only 5.5. I mean, and I'm picking them to win. But again, I'm going to take a flyer on that. I mean, the reason that the reason that they have 5.5 is they could win 6 or 7 games and win the conference. Remember, at Ohio State, at Troy, those are two non-conference games. Hard. At UTEP, at FIU. So it's definitely possible, but excuse me, I would stay away from their season win total. So let's bring up who we have here.
If this works out for you, maybe I have to get you a Miners hat or T-shirt.
Oh, I like that. I would wear that proudly. I would wear Go Miners. Again,
University of Texas, El Paso.
Think about the return here. That's what you got to think about if you're willing to take that risk. So let's go to who we picked for the season win totals. I don't like Liberty. I mean, they're going to be in a new coaching system. Hugh Freeze went to the SEC. He's back home at Auburn. I think they're going to go under their 8.5. I think, honestly, and I like Jamie Chadwell. He's coming in. You talk about a coaching change. Great coach from Coastal Carolina. Yep. He's at Liberty now, but I expect a little chaos there. 8.5, I don't think so. I think they're going to be under that. I do like Western Kentucky to go over their 8 wins. I think they're going to be hot. I don't know that they can get 10 or 11. I think they could get 9, and those are my picks. You, Dan, have Liberty also going under, but yet you're picking them to win.
Yeah, their schedule's hard, but they need to win in conference to win the championship. That's the key. I like the coaching hire of Jamie Chadwell. That's why I picked them.
Interesting.
To win the conference. I think he's a program builder. I mean, Coastal Carolina was a joke. My first Penn State game in 2008 as a freshman was against Coastal Carolina, and Joe Pa's team, I think, put 70 plus up on them. So they went from that to being pretty relevant within 10 years.
I think that was a 66-7 score, if I remember my facts correctly.
I believe so. I mean, that was welcome to Penn State. That was a great Saturday to enjoy some offense for a change in the Paterno era.
Middle Tennessee is your next one. You've got them going over, and they're at 6.5.
I think that's an easy number. I really do.
Well, let's look at their. Can we look at their schedule? They've got.
Yep, I'm pulling it up now. So
okay. Well, now hold on a second, Dan. Hold on now. 6.5. You're going over at Alabama, at Missouri.
Yeah, obviously those aren't ideal. Now it's giving me Western Kentucky instead of what I asked for. Hold on one second. It says try reloading. Where's the schedule?
All right, I have it here. Then they then they host Murray State. They host Colorado State.
Yep.
At Western Kentucky though. So that could be a third loss. Jacksonville State, LA Tech at home, at Liberty. I mean, look at these tough road games. Yeah. So now we're at 4 losses. At New Mexico State, FIU, UTEP, and then at Sam Houston. There are 4 or 5 losses, so they need to get so if you've got them getting to 7.
They could swing one of those losses is kind of my point.
They could. You need to get them to 7 wins, though. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, again, that's why Vegas is smart here. I see 6.
They're very smart.
We will see if you end up being right on that. Let's move on. We want to go down to the MAC. And what do you love about MACtion? And again, do we know who's in this conference this year?
Well, here's what's tough about the MAC. You know, Penn State played 2 MAC teams last year. They played Ohio and they played Central Michigan. And coming into the season, all the pundits said, well, Central Michigan's going to be the harder of the 2. And look at the season Ohio had. And what's fun about the MAC is I feel like teams come out of nowhere on them. Some of my favorite coaches are in the MAC, a la Joe Moorhead at Akron. Kent State, the Golden Flashes, are Penn State's one of Penn State's favorite teams to beat up on there in the MAC. But Miami, Ohio will always kind of have a special place in my heart too, because watching Ben Roethlisberger come out of there, and on top of that, I knew a guy that I played baseball with that went to Miami of Ohio and followed his career, Matt Johnson. So there's always just something fun about the MAC that you just catch a game here and there during the week, and they end up being competitive.
Oh, yeah. Some of these teams are very competitive with some of the bigger schools as well. So let's pull up the favorites right now as it stands. Toledo is the favorite at plus 180, and then Ohio at plus 220. It falls off greatly after that. Yep. Miami of Ohio, the team that you just mentioned, plus 750. Eastern Michigan at plus 800 along with Buffalo. So you could make a play at one of those.
Good old directional schools.
You know, Toledo and Ohio, right there in the Midwest, 2 of the favorites. So who do you like?
Well, to me, this is always hard. Ohio had such a good year last year. They were 10-4, appeared in the Arizona Bowl. I tend to want to go with them. I saw them in person. That's partially my bias, and they did give Penn State some headaches last year. So there does seem to be some talent on that team. Who knows? Ohio could totally flip their record around this year, and I could be totally wrong, but they are my favorite.
And for the record, that is who?
What's that?
Who are you picking? You're going with Ohio.
Yep.
Plus 220, not bad.
Toledo was 9-5 last year, so it is kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, I think Toledo all the way. I'm gonna pick them, and I think they're gonna win it, and I see them being very tough. They've got 8 starters back on offense, including their quarterback, and 8 back on defense. That's 16 returning starters.
Best secondary in the MAC. They're advertised as.
And when you look at their schedule, I think they have a shot at upsetting Illinois in Week 1. I think they do.
Wow.
I want you to keep an eye on that game. Okay.
Holy cow!
I may call Holy Toledo.
Yeah, Brett Bielema, watch yourself.
I think it could happen. Texas Southern, San Jose State, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois is always a tough team, but I'm not seeing anything on
They
here
were
that
3
excites
and
me.
9 last year, Northern
Yeah,
Illinois. That's
since Dave
you know,
Doran left, they haven't done much. At Massachusetts, at Ball State, at Miami of Ohio, Buffalo, Eastern Michigan, at Bowling Green, at Central Michigan. I don't see a tough game on there. I think they can get over their win total. Which, by the way, let me pull those up. This is why I like
yep, let's
Toledo.
see those.
I think it's a doable schedule. If they beat Brett Bielema in week 1, and I think they have a shot to do it, they would absolutely get over that 8.5. They stand above the fray here, Dan. Toledo at 8.5, Eastern Michigan at 7.5, Ohio 7.5. Your Bobcats there. You've got Miami of Ohio at 7.5, Buffalo at 6, Central Michigan at 5.5, Northern Illinois only 5.5 per your point of them
Yeah.
falling off. You mentioned Akron. Our friend Joe Moorhead, only 4 wins, and the Golden Flashes of Kent State round at the bottom at 2.5. So let's pull up the next graphic, which would be our thoughts or a couple picks for.
Well, you're going to see Joe Moorhead pop up again.
You are. So we'll start. I think Toledo's going to be over. Again, call me crazy. I think that's an easy bet, and there is no easy bet ever. But I love that. And I've got Ohio going over too, because when you talk about them and you know you're picking them, that they're at plus 220 to win the conference, right? As you said. Let me pull up their schedule, because
I'm doing it right now.
you start to play the scheduling game, and it gets a little more fun. Ready? At San Diego State.
Yeah,
That's
at
a
San Diego
fun
State.
game. That could be a fun game. Then Long Island at
Who
Florida.
is that?
We will not be talking about them on this podcast.
No, we will not.
At Florida Atlantic. Iowa State, an interesting one. At Bowling Green, Kent State, at Northern Illinois, Western Michigan, Miami, Ohio at home, at Buffalo, Central Michigan, and at Akron. I mean, again, at San Diego State is tough. At Bowling Green could be tough. Iowa
But
State.
the rest of it's very manageable.
And remember, 7.5. So they just need to get to 8 wins. I don't know if I see 4 losses on there, if they're who we think they are. I like Ohio, and I like the over. And speaking of that, now, Dan, this is one of those times I have to call you out here.
Yep, let's hear it.
You are picking them to win the conference, but yet you're going under 7.5 wins.
Yeah, so I think what's difficult about the MAC is these teams tend to beat each other up. While the schedule doesn't look like a gauntlet right now, you know, they could lose to Miami of Ohio. They could lose to Buffalo. I saw those as potential traps. Central Michigan, I like their coaching. I like their talent. They didn't have a great year last year. But, you know, again, all these games can be relatively close in conference.
They could, and to that point, they could still win, get to the championship game and pull an upset, or beat Toledo outright. And then, of course, you've got Akron over 4 games. Really?
Yeah, I mean, what's not to love about Joe Moorhead? And he's been so active. I still follow his accounts from, you know, the Penn State days. I still see him on Twitter, and he's out there. I mean, he's actively recruiting, and everything I've heard about the guy, student athletes love him. And I think he just got an extension. I think he could turn Akron at least into a reputable program, believe it or not. He's got what it takes as a coach. We saw it firsthand, coming from Fordham to Penn State and not missing a beat.
But can he do it in a conference like this with a team that isn't known for being very good?
Well, I think in Joe Moorhead, I trust. I still wish he was our offensive coordinator. He had my favorite offense I've seen Penn State run to date.
I would agree, and let's hope it's even better this year. That's always a challenge. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But all right, let's move on. It's time to focus on our friends out west, and that would be the Mountain West. Top 5 odds to win the conference: Boise State plus 220, Fresno State plus 260, and then after that, again, it falls off. Air Force at plus 25, and an interesting one, San Diego State plus 750. See, that would be one I would think about maybe taking a flyer on, because I do like Brady Hoke. I like him there. Didn't like him at Michigan. And then Wyoming, even though
he was
I liked
dope in Michigan.
Right, exactly. I mean, I liked him at Michigan because we won, but he was a little bit dopey, even though he was a Michigan man. Wyoming at plus 1,000. So who do you like? Who do you got here? And how can it not be Boise State? I'll tell you right now, I think they'll do it on the blue turf.
They're the easy pick. Quarterback Taylor Green, very exciting. Now, they have a loaded non-conference schedule. They tend to do this so they can be on the national stage. They play Washington, UCF, and Memphis. So if somehow they get through that, they could be in possible Group 5 playoff discussion. Undefeated is going to be the hard part for them, and it could die week 1 against Washington. So I think that's the tough call. I always hate a tough game right out of the chute when you don't know what you got. You mentioned Fresno State. Jeff Tedford, does he still got it?
Yes.
They really haven't been in the national picture as of late. San Diego State, they were 7-6 last year, and that's down from a 12-2 season in 2021. So what's that all about? Those are kind of my questions about the conference. But Air Force always tends to overachieve because they put up points and yards. That's a team to watch.
Yeah, I really like Jeff Tedford. I'm a Ted head, and I am. I love the guy. I mean, they are Vegas has them favored second. I'm not sure Phil Steele thinks that they could do that well, but I like Boise State to get it done.
I like them too.
I think they're going to be improved. But having said that, let me read you their schedule before we move on to win totals.
It's rough.
It's a little rougher than I thought, and this makes me want to pick my boy, Jeff Tedford. But I'm going to stick with Boise State for now. But as you said, they open at Washington. Then UCF, North Dakota at home. They have to travel to San Diego State. I don't like that. That's on a Friday night, by the way. They have to travel to Memphis back-to-back. I don't like that. San Jose State at Colorado State, then the bye. Wyoming at home, and then they have to go to Fresno State. I don't know. I got to tell you, I'm switching it. I'm going to pick Jeff Tedford. I don't like this schedule. Can I switch my pick in the middle of this? I'm gonna.
Sure. Hey, it's not final until it's final.
I really hate that schedule. I mean, that is something else. Actually, we're live, and you look at these things, and it's like, ooh, look at those road games, Dan. That is tough.
Yes. Another team that I had kind of earmarked here is Colorado State. They actually played better in the second half of the season under Jay Norvell. They could have a little momentum. They have a quarterback returning in Clay Millen. So they may not be contenders for the conference title, but they could be a bowl team, which would be a huge step forward for that program that's been in the dumpster.
Yeah, and I want to bring up, as you say, that the Mountain West future win totals. So you got 3 teams at 8.5: Air Force, Fresno State, and Boise State. They're right there. Brady Hoke coming in with 7, and then it kind of falls off. UNLV at 6, San Jose State 5.5, Wyoming 5.5, Colorado State at 5. We're going to get to that because I think I know what you're going to do with that. Unfortunately, Nevada has fallen off at 4, Hawaii 3.5, and we round out with New Mexico. So let's get to our picks, and I'll tell you mine, and then we'll go into yours. I don't see how Air Force can win 8.5. I think that's a little tricky for them. Their schedule,
I agree,
is not bad. Robert Morris at Sam Houston, Utah State at San Jose State. They do host San Diego State. I like that. They host Wyoming. They have to go to Navy. They have to go to Colorado State, to Hawaii, and then they play at Boise State to end the year. Air Force is one of those teams that always seems like they're going to be better.
Yes.
I'm going to take the under, and I'm actually going to take Hawaii under 3.5. I don't see how they can win 4 games. So I think at the bottom of the conference, I'm going to take an under there, and I just don't like them. So you just gave your case for Colorado State. You're picking them over. What do you like about their schedule?
Well, let me. I knew you were going to ask that, and I should have had it queued up. But I just think momentum is such a big thing in college football, and if you can carry it over from year to year on a team that has learned to win, I always like that. So here is their schedule. They start against the Cougars of Washington State, then they play Colorado. Which, what are they? That's a topic for another podcast. I mean, that could be a big win against a team receiving so much ballyhoo. They play my team, Middle Tennessee State. Then they play Utah Tech. Utah State, which always is what's Utah State,
right? They always are good for an upset, but they haven't been great lately.
Yep, and then Boise State, which will likely be a loss. But then there's UNLV.
But you know what? They do host Boise State, so
Yes, that is true. That is true. It is a home game for Colorado State.
Hmm.
They also host Air Force, which should be helpful. Then they go high up there to Laramie, Wyoming,
As the great
on November 3rd.
late great Mike Leach said, strange things happen in Laramie.
Yes, well, I agree with that. Then they round out with San Diego State, which we'll see what they are under your buddy. Nevada and Hawaii is their last game. So I could see 6 wins in there.
Yeah, I mean they haven't been great, but you need them to get 6, especially with the number being 5. And you actually have Boise State again. You're picking them to win the conference, but you have picked them to go under 8.5, which is an interesting thing to be again.
Well, it's that schedule. I mean, we mentioned it. It looks rough, and they could start 0-3, or excuse me, 0-3 in non-conference. Does that partially derail them?
Well,
You
it
lose
could.
some of the wind in your sail.
I mean, the road schedule to me is pretty brutal for them, so that is something to keep in mind. But we both like them, and there's the over unders that we're picking here for the season win totals. All right, Sun Belt, Fun Belt time, Dan. Okay,
Yes.
let's go here because we've got South Alabama, which is a team that I love. I mean, I thought they had a terrific year last year. They're plus 300. Troy right there. That's a
They
team
were in the
you
New
love.
Orleans Bowl.
Right. And Troy's your team that you've got an eye on. Then App State falls to 3 at plus 500. See, there's a wager to me. Like, they're always competitive. If you wanted to take a flyer, that's not horrible odds. Coastal Carolina at plus 550. Then how about Marshall, the resurgent Marshall that beat Notre Dame last year with
Notre
our
Dame,
buddy
yeah.
with our buddy Charles Huff. Who do you like to win the conference this year?
I'm picking Troy. The schedule's it's not great, but they play Kansas State, they play JMU, they play Western Kentucky, all in September. If somehow they get through those games, they could also be a top 25 team. So again, I mentioned momentum. September is important for a lot of these teams, and that's certainly one gauntlet of a schedule that they get through that, then they're playing mostly conference games.
Yeah, you're right. But at Kansas State, Western Kentucky, at
But
Georgia
we don't
State.
know much about them. Kansas State could take a step back.
They could. But I kind of agree with you. It makes me nervous to pick South Alabama. I mean, they could do it, but because Troy hosts them, they have to play Troy on the
Yes.
road. I like
Yes.
Troy, but they do have 18 starters back. Now they're both at plus 300. It's college. I'm going to go with you and pick Troy to win the Sun Belt because they get South Alabama at home. Let's bring up
JMU could be tough, though. I mean, JMU had a very good season last year. They kind of hit a massive road bump in the middle, but JMU's an up-and-coming team. You mentioned App State. The only thing I don't like about App State is they were 6-6 last year. Is it the same kind of dog mentality they've had, where they love to come in as the underdogs and knock the socks off somebody?
Well, they had game day in town last year, and that certainly fired everybody up. But they ended up not having a very good season.
Right.
I want to talk about James Madison here for a second. When you
Sure.
look at Vegas, Vegas has them at number 1, 8.5, and then Troy right there at 8.5, with South Alabama at 8. So, I mean, Vegas says James Madison is right there. You like this team? They did well for you in our little picks
Yes.
last year. Why not? I mean, why can't they win this thing?
Well, in their opening month, they play Bucknell. Should be a win. They play Virginia. I think they could beat Virginia. Troy.
But
So
they're on
that'll be
the
a
road.
good game.
See, they're on the road to Troy. They're on the road to Marshall. They're on the road to Georgia State, and they're on the road
And
to Coastal
Utah State.
Carolina. Yeah, their road schedule's tough, if you ask me.
They play ODU, another Penn State friend there, and Ricky Ronnie at home. They bring Connecticut in, which Connecticut could also be an interesting team to follow coming off of their year last year, believe it or not.
Oh, 100%. And you never know about Georgia State either. So, when you look at that list, who do we like here to go over or under the season win totals? Well, I will tell you. Let's pull it up. I have Troy going over. I think that they can do it and get to 9 wins. I have Coastal Carolina going under, Dan, 7.5. I think the schedule isn't as friendly. And remember, they have a new coach coming in. I hate coaching transitions. I think I think it takes teams a while to
They still
get
have
their.
Grayson McCall, though.
They do. Is he still there? I feel like he's been there for how many years now?
Yeah, he was in the portal, but he decided to stay. He's one of the rare opportunities that a player decides to stay in a coaching transition.
But I mean, ultimately, I get nervous about that. I don't know that they can win. Whatever it is, 7, 8
Yeah,
wins.
I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
I would agree. So I'm going to go under there. You've got App State going over though.
I do. I think they get a little bit of their mojo back. They've been through a lot of transition too, but it's a low enough number. It seems manageable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to pull up their schedule now just because I'm curious about them. Hold on, let me pull it up here. Ready? Gardner Webb. Now they have to go to North Carolina, but they gave them fits last year. And to your point, there
that could be a win.
What is their defense going to look like? They get East Carolina at home.
If they have one.
Yeah, I don't like the at Wyoming.
Yep.
They get Coastal Carolina at home, at Old Dominion, but again, that should be a win. Southern Miss at home, Marshall at home. They do have to go to Georgia State and to James Madison in November, but again, we're talking about 6.5. They should be able to best last season, I think, if they're
Georgia Southern coming in at the end there. Yeah, I think they need 7.
And speaking of Georgia Southern, you have them going over. Explain that pick.
Yes. So good offense. I've heard them be described as the sleeper of the Sun Belt. I had their schedule. Let me try to pull it back up.
They're always dangerous though because they're one of those teams that just always seems to keep it close. And
yes.
The question will be, of course, what is it going to be like? So I've got it here.
So they play the Citadel.
The Citadel, yep. And then UAB. That's all. The UAB,
and UAB's down.
They have been. And then at Wisconsin.
Camp Randall. But that to me could be very, very interesting. Luke Fickell could get off on the wrong foot if something goes wrong there.
They get Coastal Carolina at home, but here's the deal. They have to go to James Madison.
Yes.
To Marshall late in the season, and then they end on the road against App State. Now, again, you have over 6, and like you said, we just don't know. Some of these conferences, a lot of these teams end up with 7, 8 wins, and they kind of split the difference, right?
Well, and a lot of these games could come down to the last possession, and that's why it's kind of a coin flip.
It really is. So to recap our picks here, let's say as we go through here, we both like Boise State in the Mountain West.
Yep.
I like Toledo. You like Ohio in the MAC. In the Sun Belt, we both like Troy, I believe.
Yes.
And in Conference USA, I think you went to Liberty.
I did.
Okay, and I differ there. I think who did I pick there? Oh, I picked the UTEP Miners.
You did. That's why you're going to get that T-shirt and hat if it works out.
And then lastly, the first conference, the American we talked about, we differed there slightly as well. I went UTSA, and you picked?
I picked in the American.
Yes. Because I like the odds for UTSA, and I think we are, that is there's nothing to convince me that Jeff Traylor can't get that job done. So that's kind of a wrap up and a summary here, but I think we differed on that.
Yes, we did, and now I can't seem to find my note on that.
Okay, well, I think let's see.
We could roll back the tape.
we could roll back the tape. I'll get it here in a second. Why don't you tell everybody how to find us a while again?
Sure. So while we're getting our notes straightened out, you can find us on the Apple App Store, Apple Podcasts, which, of course, any Apple device, your iPhone, your iPad, you can find us there. You can find us on YouTube if you prefer the video version. Also, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Amazon, and Spotify, always at abc27.com. That's the default, if you will. You can find us under the weather tab at Weather Wagers. We're going to be here all college football season. We're going to have more previews coming up, but there are certainly a lot of exciting week 1 matchups that we're going to get into in short order.
Right. I think it's going to be great. You picked Tulane, by the way. We can't forget about the Green Wave. So
it was on my first page and I missed it.
yeah, so that's it. So that's going to be a wrap here for us. And Dan, always great to catch up with you. Next week, we are going to have some of the big boys. I think we go ACC, Pac-12, Big 12. You got to stay tuned for that. And we will continue previewing teams all the way up. Can you believe Week 0 is just a few weeks away? We're going to have that for you on the Wednesday beforehand. How exciting is that? We want to thank everybody involved here, from our audio engineer, Dave Shiner, to the guests that we've had on over the summer. It's been great. But happy first week of August, my friend. We will have more previews coming at you next week. There's where you can find us. Dan, thanks again. We will see you back here next week, everybody, for
Thank you, guys.
Weather Wagers. Have a great week.